Blackness enveloped Lucy's vision, swallowing her surroundings whole. She had no memory of how she arrived in this place, nor could she tell how long she had spent so far within this void where light did not reach. The darkness was suffocating, oppressing. She could not see her own body within this void, nor could she even feel it. With no awareness of her body, she had no idea if she was lying down or standing up. It was as if her body was gone, her mind vacated, and now floating aimlessly throughout this dark limbo. But though her sight had failed her, there was one sense that had not: sound. Ahead of her, far into the distance, the faint cry of a baby echoed. Its wailing flooded through the blackness, traveling towards and past her, the baby's voice melting through her as it did, her being absorbing it whole. The baby's presence was familiar, yet she did not know why. It was as if it was a remnant of an old, buried memory that she could not consciously recall. But before she could ponder any longer, the baby's crying came to an abrupt and violent stop as Lucy's eyes shot open. Her awareness of her own body returned to her. She was lying down, her back against the ground, gazing up at the sky, pale and colorless. She wriggled slightly at the discomfort of the rocky, hard, and cold terrain beneath her. She sat up, taking in her surroundings. Blinking and rubbing her eyes, she realized that she was near the shore of a foggy beach, on the rocks, waves rhythmically crashing against them, creating the only sound that was present within this barren landscape. This beach was alien to Lucy. She blinked in confusion, quickly scouring her memory for any recollection as to how she had gotten here and why. But she did not know. Her bewildered eyes turned fearful, her heart and gut uneased by this place's unfamiliar yet otherworldly vibe. She rose to her feet, scanning the area around her masked by the fog, before reluctantly taking a step forward to explore this area. Yet she had no idea what awaited her. Lucy navigated the rocky landscape of this black beach, eyes taking in the pale and muted scenery around her, convinced that this beach had no end, that it would go on forever and ever. The only question being how long it would take for her legs to grow weary. She sighed and came to a stop. Her head hung low, her long, parted brown hair hanging around her lowered head like a veil. But as her eyes gazed at the ground below, it didn't take long for something to catch her eye. Lucy raised her wrist. She was wearing a hospital bracelet. She touched the bracelet with her other hand, rotating her forearm as she examined it from all angles. Her name was printed on it, Trembley, Lucy, but she did not know why she was wearing it. She had no memory of ever visiting a hospital. As she thought about it more and more, she realized that she had no memory of anything from the past few months of her life, perhaps even longer. Her last memory was of home, in her bedroom, getting ready for sleep. A rather ordinary night, but she could not tell how long ago that memory was. It could have been weeks ago, months, maybe even a whole year. She had completely lost track of time, and there was no telling how many more memories were now lost. She lowered her arm and looked back up at the landscape before her. Her eyes widened in surprise, her chest filled with both hope and uncertainty, as she noticed there was someone in the distance. The person ahead stood on a small, rocky cliff, overlooking the ocean, watching the crashing waves. But Lucy could not tell who they were. She could barely even make out their visage through the fog, and the fact that they were quite a long distance away certainly didn't help matters either. Lucy decided to take her chances, and slowly, she made her way towards the mysterious figure. Yet it was a shame that she was so focused on the person ahead, for if she had thought to turn around, then no doubt she would have noticed the hand behind her, reaching out, the tips of its fingers nearly touching her hair. As she got closer and closer to the figure, so too did the hand, inching ever so slightly towards her, until finally it got close enough to softly clutch her shoulder. Lucy let out a sharp gasp. Shocked, she spun around, her fight or flight instincts kicking in as soon as she broke away from the grasp. On edge, confused, her eyes rested upon a slim, pale man dressed in black. Dark cloth was wrapped around his head, covering half of his face, hiding his eyes, but leaving his mouth and jaw exposed. He was clean-shaven with sharp, slim features. He towered over her as she looked up. Lucy couldn't help but wonder how long the man had been following her, but if there was one question that was nagging at her even more, it was who this man was, and what his intentions were. "Lucy, I'm sorry that we're here," he whispered, low and breathy. Even though his presence was calming, Lucy couldn't help but feel both intrigued and scared of the unknown. She looked over her shoulder back to the cliff, but strangely enough, whoever was standing there had vanished. She wondered to herself how the figure could have disappeared so quickly, but eventually she turned to face the man before her once again. Her breathing slowed. She couldn't help but feel vulnerable, fearful, as she asked, "Who are you? Where am I?" The man tilted his head to the right, pausing before answering her. "You don't recognize me." "Figures. I had a feeling that might happen." Took a moment of silence again, before smiling warmly. "I am Gabriel," he introduced. "As for this place, we are in the SALLOW coast, a beach forgotten by most long ago." "Wait, we know each other?" "Yes. But I don't remember you. I don't even remember how I got here. The last thing I remember..." "Lucy," Gabriel softly interrupted her, leaning in towards her. "It's okay. We're safe here. Nobody can hurt us anymore." She looked up at him, silent for a while as she allowed all of the information she was being given to sink in. "How did we get here?" Gabriel did not answer. "Gabriel, how did we get here?" "I'm sorry, Lucy. I can't tell you." Her breathing became rapid, the adrenaline of both fear and anger washing through her, combining to create a confused mess of emotions, further intensifying the anxiety she was already experiencing. "What the hell? Why? Where did you come from? How did I get here? What is this place? Tell me! Gabriel, tell me!" "Lucy, I can't." "Fine then. I'm done wasting my time with you. I'm leaving this beach. I'll find my own way home somehow." "You can't." "What?" "You can't. Neither of us can leave the SALLOW coast. We're stuck here, you and I." Lucy could not comprehend her situation, as she stood there, confused. All she wanted was answers to put her mind at ease. Yet this man before her refused to help put a stop to her racing thoughts. Gabriel let out a weary exhale of breath. "I'm sorry, Lucy. It's my fault that we got here. But at least here, we will be safe. Nobody can hurt you, ever, again." He turned to walk away as Lucy shifted her gaze to the ocean, processing everything he told her. She turned back to him to ask more questions, but before she could even speak, he had vanished. Fearful and confused, her hands subtly shaking, she refocused her thoughts back onto the cliff in the distance. She had no idea what else to do but to continue her journey across this mysterious beach and try to find the figure she saw before. It didn't take long for Lucy to reach the cliff. She turned to her left, then her right, looking out for anything suspicious. There was nothing in sight, so she took a step forward, climbing up the rocky slope towards towards the edge of the cliff. Suddenly, a soft crunch of plastic drew her attention to her feet. It was another hospital bracelet, similar to the one she was wearing. She picked it up, holding it up in front of her eyes as she compared it to the one on her wrist. This bracelet was much smaller than hers, and with that single realization, even more came flooding through. This bracelet belonged to a newborn baby boy. And not just that, the surname of the baby's bracelet was also the same as her own, Trembley. Lucy's mind swirled with anxiety, her heart palpitating, as she was left wondering if this baby was none other than hers. But she did everything she could to rationalize the situation because surely she wasn't really a mother, right? She would definitely remember something like that. Why didn't she have any memory of being pregnant or giving birth? The idea of having a child was so very, very alien. There had to be an explanation for all of this. She pulled herself out of her trance, stroking the side of her face downwards with her index and middle fingers as a reality check in order to remove herself from her thoughts, regain her senses, and focus more on the present moment. She decided to put the bracelet in her pocket, continue searching the beach for an explanation, any explanation, for all of this. But when she turned around, she found herself freezing in place, as if time itself had come to an abrupt stop. Her anxiety, her uncertainty, once again began to boil within. She was struck with such immobilizing fear because something had just caught her attention. The slow, husky breathing of someone standing directly behind her. Lucy didn't understand. She was just on the edge of the cliff moments ago. There was nobody except for her. How could there now be someone all of a sudden? She stood frozen in fear for a few more moments. She wanted to look behind her and run away all at once, but she could do neither. Instead, she moved not a muscle as she listened to the breathing mixed in with the sound of the ocean and the waves. Eventually, she found the courage to slowly turn her head, looking over her shoulder behind her. Lucy's eyes rested upon a woman, her back turned to her. It didn't take long to figure out that this was the exact same figure she saw before. Lucy watched as the woman continued breathing in and out as she gazed out at the ocean stretched out wide before her. Whoever this woman was, she had not yet noticed Lucy. Lucy turned her entire body around, now directly facing the woman. She thought about calling out to her, saying something, but she was too scared, worried that this mysterious person could be of any danger. So instead, she carefully approached the woman, attempting to get a good look at her face. But once she did, nothing could prepare her for the confusion that would hit her. She was staring at her own face. This woman was herself. This doppelganger of herself was in a trance, unblinking, with deadness behind her eyes and a static expression, as if she was a dead girl walking. Lucy then saw her baby boy in her arms, her son, who had just woken up and had begun crying and wailing, his voice echoing throughout the beach. Lucy reached out to her doppelganger, but before she could touch her shoulder, Lucy was immediately struck, with pain in her heart stinging, the insides of her body sharpening, as she watched her doppelganger do the unthinkable. She dropped her baby son into the ocean. Both the baby and the doppelganger immediately vanished a split second after the baby hit the rocks below, as if they were never there to begin with. Lucy staggered, breath shaky, quickly spinning around to leave the cliff before losing her balance as she almost tripped over something. Lucy looked down, and she saw her own body laying before her feet, dead. Blood oozed from the back of her head, trickling down the rocky slopes, eyes remaining open, gazing up at the plain, colorless sky. Lucy got onto her knees in front of her body, examining the injury, before the idea entered her mind that she should touch the back of her own head. And that is exactly what she did. She felt the wetness of blood behind her hair, in the same spot as her doppelganger. Her breath quickened. The wound was there the entire time, and only now had she finally noticed it. In the midst of her grief and terror, she heard Gabriel's voice ahead. "You saw a vision. That's interesting." Her eyes darted up, catching sight of Gabriel standing a few feet away on the other side of the body. She looked back down her own body, but just like before, her doppelganger was gone again. Lucy struggled to accept the conclusion her mind had just reached, and as she was on the verge of tears, shivering, she finally asked, "Oh my God, what's happening? What is this?" Gabriel sighed, approaching and kneeling down next to her. "I didn't want you to see that." "What have I done?" she exclaimed with a shaky voice. Am I dead?" "Yes." Her eyes turned away from Gabriel, taking a moment to process the revelation. But no matter what, she couldn't. She couldn't accept the fact that she was dead, that she had a son that she murdered. "That baby was my son. I know it was. Why would I kill him? Why on earth would I kill my own son? What is this place? Where am I? Is this hell?" "No, you're not in hell. This realm is not a bad place, yet neither is it a good one." "None of this makes sense. Just please tell me everything. I just want to understand." Gabriel paused for a moment, collecting his words. Then he answered. "What you just saw was a memory, your last moments alive. These are memories you forgot, repressed before coming here. I didn't want you to remember. I wanted to hide the truth from you. But the SALLOW coast is sentient. It wants you to learn the truth. It's doing all it can to help you remember, regain all the memories you lost." Lucy's breathing slowed, all of the terror turning to sadness as she slowly came to terms with her death. Gabriel continued. "The SALLOW coast is a real beach that exists in the living world. It was a place you visited with your baby son so that you could kill him. In the process, you yourself accidentally died when you slipped on the rocks on the way back home. Now, this realm has modeled itself after the same beach to further help you remember." "But Gabriel, that doesn't make sense. I know myself. I know that I'm not the kind of person who would kill their own child. That's not me. That's something I would never do. Why? Why would I do such a thing?" Gabriel did not answer. She rose to her feet, towering over him as she further interrogated. "Gabriel, who are you? Well, why won't you just tell me everything?" He too got back up onto his feet, replying with, "I'm trying to protect you." "That doesn't answer my question." "If you knew all of the answers, you would be able to leave this place. I can't let you leave. You're so much safer here than you ever will be anywhere else." Whereas before, Lucy was cautious of this man. Now, she was becoming increasingly more fearful. His very words were tinted with obsession, and it was causing alarm bells to ring for her. She asked, "What are you? Some kind of demon?" "No, Lucy." "Then answer me. Who are you?" "I am your friend. I always have been." She had enough. Enough of him, enough of this beach. Her fist clenched, her shoulders shook, and whereas once there was sadness within her, now anger was taking hold. "I'm done with you," she said. "No, you're not, Lucy, because I'm not done with you." In the heat of the moment, she struck Gabriel across the face. "Tell me everything!
Gabriel. I want to leave. I want to get out of here.
He did not answer, so she swatted him again, but this time, Gabriel evaded her fist, countering her, then hitting her with the back of his hand. She fell to the rocky ground below, unconscious. He looked down at her body, inhaling, then letting out all of his tension with an exhale of breath. He looked down at his knuckles, bruised from the impact of the hit, before lowering and unclenching his fist, turning his attention back to Lucy. Why did you make me do that, Lucy? He spoke to the comatose woman, his tone tinged with both disappointment and regret. Slowly, he knelt down, crouching beside her. He reached out to her, stroking her cheek, before running his fingers through her hair. If only you could understand. I'm just trying to do what's in your best interest. You don't know what's good for you, not like I do. Then he leaned into her face, resting his forehead against hers as he whispered, I love you, Lucy. I love you with every fiber of my being. Lucy's eyes shot open, but she wasn't on the beach anymore, nor was Gabriel in sight. Instead, she was somewhere much more familiar. She was standing in the corner of her bedroom. She didn't have time to ponder why she was here, as the door to her room swung open, and she saw herself storm into the room before slamming the door shut behind her. With tears in her eyes, the other Lucy rested her back against the door, shaking. Little by little, Lucy began to realize that this was a memory, one of her forgotten memories, that she was now reliving in third person. Suddenly, a knock at the door, and the voice of an older woman on the other side of the door. Lucy, open up. Please, let me talk to you. The other Lucy replied, Oh, really? You made it abundantly clear that there's nothing left to talk about. Lucy, just let me in, okay? Her head hung low. She took a couple moments to herself before turning around to open the door. On the other side of the door was her mother. Lucy, you need not worry anymore, okay? But I'm scared, Mum. I don't know what to do. It feels like my life is already over. I understand that this all must be so overwhelming for you. And I'm proud of you for telling me the truth. But don't worry, we can help you, sweetie. No, you can't help me. If you really wanted to help me, then you would let me get rid of this damned child that I don't want. Lucy, mind your language. You have the nerve to tell me to mind my language when you're the one treating me like this? Screw you! Lucy, why can't you let me get rid of this kid? I don't want to go through pregnancy. I don't want to give birth. I don't want to be a mother. I just want to live my own life. I want my future back. I just want to be free. You can still have your own life, sweetie, but you also have a responsibility now. You can't abandon that. That's a neat way of saying that you're a conservative hypocrite. You don't care about me. You don't even care about the baby. You're just forcing this on me because you want to feel altruistic. When in actuality, once this kid is born, you'll stop giving a shit. Lucy, that's not true. Mum, just go. Leave. I'm done with you. You don't care about me, so why should I care about anything you have to say? Listen. Just go. Leave. I don't want you here right now. Get out of my room. Her mother sighed. I know you don't mean any of that. I'll give you some time by yourself. She turned around, leaving as Lucy slammed the door shut behind her. I hate this family, hate this town, hate my life, she murmured to herself, voice shaky. I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't. She collapsed onto her bed. Reaching for a pillow, she laid on her side. She held the pillow close to her body, shoulders shaking, as she began to softly cry. I'm so alone. I'm so alone. Lucy watched her past self, crying on the bed. She remembered everything now, that day when the pregnancy test came back positive. All of the overwhelming, suffocating emotions she was feeling. Drowning in the ocean of her own emotions, feeling like she was as good as dead, dreading the life that now awaited her. But there was something else about that day Lucy did not remember. Something she had no idea was happening. Now that she was witnessing the events of this day in third person for the first time ever, she could see what she could not before. Gabriel was standing behind her. It was as if he appeared out of nowhere. Lucy did not see him enter the room, nor materialize. It was as if he was simply standing there the entire time, and only now had she finally noticed him. She watched as Gabriel approached the bed, sitting on the edge. His eyes did not shift away from the past Lucy as she continued crying. Then he reached out and touched her. Once the tips of his fingers had touched her cheek, Lucy abruptly stopped crying. Her body lying still, unblinking, as if her own consciousness had just vacated her body and she was no longer there, frozen like a rag doll. Gabriel caressed her cheek as she laid there almost lifeless. He had completely taken control of her, and now she was no longer present. Only he was. Lucy watched him with dread sinking into her gut. She had no idea he had even been a part of her life for this long, that he was even there to begin with. She recalled how she blacked out in that moment, assuming that she had just simply fallen asleep upon regaining consciousness later in the afternoon. But no, she wasn't asleep. Someone else was just taking control of her. Lucy's eyes shot open again. She was back on the beach, regaining consciousness after Gabriel knocked her out, the memory now over. She quickly sat up, quickly surveying her surroundings, searching for Gabriel. But he was nowhere in sight. Then suddenly, the familiar exclamations of her baby crying. Her head sharply spun around towards the cliff nearby, catching a glimpse of a figure standing on the edge, holding her child. But this time, she knew it wasn't her. She quickly got to her feet, running towards the figure, reaching in the split second they dropped the baby. Upon seeing who the figure was, all of her suspicions were proven correct. It was Gabriel. Lucy's mind swirled with a multitude of different thoughts. The reality of the situation was difficult for her to comprehend. The vision of Gabriel disappeared, and she turned around to leave the area. Then suddenly, a hand wrapped itself around her throat with lightning-quick speed. The hand belonged to Gabriel, and the grip was tight, with no signs of it loosening anytime soon. Lucy was at his whim.
You. It was you. You killed my baby.
You shouldn't have seen that, he hissed with a raspy tone.
You just had to be curious, didn't you? You just couldn't trust me when I am the only one who ever cared about you. The only one who stood by your side when everyone you love abandoned you. You made me blame myself. You convinced me that I did this, but all along, you were the one who's guilty.
Gabriel let her go. Lucy raised her hand to touch her painful throat, stepping away from Gabriel and creating as much distance between the two of them as possible. You are just as guilty of murder as I am, Lucy. Oh, really? Why? And don't you dare play games with me again. Gabriel turned around, stepping away from Lucy. With that, he started unwrapping the black cloth around his head, and once it was completely removed, Lucy saw with her own two eyes. He had the exact same bloodied wound as her at the back of his head. He turned back to face her, his eyes completely black. He approached her, releasing his grip on the cloth and letting it fall to the ground below. Step by step, Lucy backed away from him until eventually she stood at the edge of the cliff. Nowhere to go. She could already piece together the truth for herself, but if there was any doubt, Gabriel was about to spell it out for her. He ran the palm of his hand over his wound, smearing it in blood, before touching her face with the same hand, smearing the blood diagonally across the face, as he whispered, "You're as guilty as I am, Lucy, because we share the same soul." Her gaze was fixated on Gabriel's eyes, black to the point where it felt like she was looking into the void itself. He removed the palm of his hand from her skin before smiling at her. But it wasn't a sinister smile by any means, but more so a sentimental one. "Oh, my Lucy, you've led such a difficult life, haven't you? You never truly enjoyed being alive, didn't you? That's why I exist, darling. I exist to protect you." "But you killed my baby. How is that protecting me? Because you never wanted that disgusting thing, and your family forced the responsibility onto you. There was a time when you dreaded becoming a mother, hated everything your life had become. But when that day finally came, the day when you gave birth, you loved him in an instant. You stopped caring about anything else as soon as you saw him with your own eyes." "Where are you going with this?" she asked. "Lucy, you may have loved your son, but I never did. So you took control of me so that you could kill him. It all makes sense now. I've always taken control of you. Whenever you had to do something you were too afraid to do or felt too weak to handle, I took over. Like I told you, I've always protected you. And as soon as you came home from the hospital, I knew that once again, I had to do what you couldn't. Then not only is it your fault that my son is dead, but that I am too. You're the one who slipped on the rocks. You're the one who robbed me of my life. Now I see why you didn't want me to regain my memories. It's a little more complicated than that." "How so?" Lucy asked. But before he could answer, the truth hit her. "Wait, you told me that if I knew the truth, then I would be able to leave. So, you understand now what must be done?" Lucy nodded her head. "This is my purgatory. I have to repent before I can progress beyond death. You're a part of me, Gabriel. A part of me that I have to kill." "Indeed, but I can't let that happen." "Why? Because you want to survive?" "No, because we don't know what sort of life awaits us after this one. I don't know what's going to happen to you. That's why you're safer here, where I can look after you for eternity, like I've always wanted to." Lucy lowered her gaze, to which Gabriel outstretched his arms, saying, "You spent your life feeling so alone, Lucy. Felt like an outsider within your own family, at school, in your neighborhood. People always betrayed your trust, took advantage of you. But you were never alone. I was always there. Stay with me, please. We can linger here until the end of time itself, where I can give you all of the affection and attention you've always wanted. She looked back up at him. Lucy's gaze pierced his, and with her mind made up, she answered, "No, Gabriel. I will never forgive you for killing my son." Gabriel remained silent as he took a few steps away from her, thinking through his response. Slowly, he lowered himself into a pose where he looked like he was getting ready to sprint towards her at any second, bracing himself for the fight that lay ahead. Lucy clenched her fists, she too preparing herself. "There is a reason why I know more than you," he explained. "We've fought many times already. Every time I win, the SALLOW coast resets your memory, makes you start all over again. We're stuck in an endless loop, but that's okay. Maybe in the next loop, you'll finally accept my love for you. Nothing will ever take back what you did to me and my son." With aggression coloring her thoughts, Lucy ran at him, swinging. She struck at him once, then twice, Gabriel evading each of her strikes before eventually he countered her, slashing her across the cheek with his nails. She staggered to the side, stunned momentarily. "You always begin by trying that. Every single time. Just stop, Lucy. I hate hurting you." She jolted back into action, attempting to punch him yet again, but he continued to dodge all of her attacks, soon retaliating by striking her with the back of his hand, causing her to hit the ground below. She looked up at Gabriel, towering above her. Lucy got up onto her knees, her eyes darting to the left and the right, catching sight of a rock. She picked it up, quickly swinging it at Gabriel. That hit was successful, knocking him to the ground too, oozing blackened blood. Without a second thought, she rushed over to him before he could get up. She pinned him down as she thrust the sharp end of the rock towards him with both hands, but Gabriel caught her wrist just in time, resisting with all of his strength. The rock was inching towards his throat, so close yet so far. Then the rock was pushed upwards little by little as Lucy began to lose her strength, Gabriel slowly overpowering her. It seemed like she was going to be unsuccessful until quickly an idea entered her head. Lucy let go of the rock with her left hand, continuing to hold it in place with her right, using her left hand to hit the rock, hammering it downwards, then finally piercing Gabriel through the throat. Quickly and violently, Gabriel's life was now forfeit. The rock hit the ground below as Lucy exhaustedly fell to Gabriel's side. He lay there, barely able to speak as blackened blood oozed out of his wound. Yet still, he was able to manage some words in a hoarse, breathy tone. "Lucy. Lucy." She turned to him in silence as Gabriel gazed up at the sky, bleeding out, struggling for air. "I only ever wanted you to be happy." "I know." A second later, Gabriel was dead. She lay there in silence next to his body, gradually processing the fact that she had just destroyed a part of herself, the hidden side of her personality, her mind, responsible for both her and her son's deaths. Though a part of her hated him, she still felt sad, bittersweet. They were both the same person, after all. But now that she let Gabriel go, she knew that something better awaited her in the life beyond this one, for she had finally passed the SALLOW Coast's test. As she reflected on her thoughts, it didn't take long for something to catch Lucy's attention. In the distance, to her left, far from the beach's shore, she heard the familiar wailing of a newborn baby. Her heart fluttered. She knew who it was. She got up off the ground, abandoning Gabriel's body as she followed the cries of her son. The wailing grew louder as she got closer and closer before finally her heart sank with adoration. Yearning overtook her mind as Lucy's eyes laid upon the sight of her son behind some of the nearby rocks wrapped in blankets. She dropped to her knees, wondering if it was really the spirit of her son or just another vision. But either way, she didn't care. She reached towards him, picking him up with both hands. The crying eventually came to a stop as she cradled him in her arms. He reached for her with his tiny hand. Lucy wrapped hers around it, smiling with watery eyes as she gazed into his. She began rocking him to sleep, saying in a calm and quiet tone, "I'm sorry, David. I hope you can forgive me. But don't worry, everything's okay now. Mommy's never going to betray you again." His eyes began to slowly, gradually close as he drifted off to sleep. Lucy softly breathed in, breathed out, tuning out her surroundings as she focused on nothing but him. Eventually, she noticed her surroundings going brighter little by little. She looked up, turned into the ocean nearby, watching the waves crash against the rocky shore. As the landscape intensified with light, instinctually, deep in her chest and gut, Lucy knew that it was time. In this moment, she felt ready more than ever. With her son laying in her arms, Lucy's surroundings faded to white. Peace, like she had never known before, began blossoming within her, coursing throughout every fiber of her being, as if her body was a garden beginning to flourish. Her soul nourished, she held her baby tightly, knowing that for the both of them, all was now well.